Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Hey everybody, today I'm speaking to my guest Maureen Borzacchiello from The Real Talk with Maureen Borzacchiello. Maureen and I have been friends for a long time, and we share a list of firsts that I'm privileged to have with her. One of the things we did together was we rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, where we were the first all-woman team in the history of the stock exchange to do so. Another first we shared was to grow our businesses to over $1 million. We were in the Make Mine a Million program with Nell Merlino, and that was one of the first all-woman mastermind cohorts to focus on getting women over the $1 million mark. Her other firsts include being the first of 7 children, and we'll talk about that today, being the first grandchild on her mom's side. I'm sure she was spoiled. She had a business at 13, got promoted to general manager to run a multi-million-dollar company by the age of 29. First family member to be featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, in the New York Times, and in the Wall Street Journal, and was also the first in her family to be on a board of directors. If you want to reach Maureen, you can contact her at maureenborza.com. And her podcast is also on that site at /podcast. On LinkedIn, she's Maureen Borzacchiello, 2 C's, 2 L's. And on Facebook, she's Maureen Borza. Welcome, Maureen. Hey, everybody. Today I'm speaking to Maureen Borzacchiello. Maureen and I have been friends for quite some time, so I'm very excited to find out all the firsts that I didn't know about. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. Hi, Sandy. I'm so excited to be here with you.
No, thanks. Thanks for participating. I was going through your list of firsts, and I'm overwhelmed.
I mean, some of them are really small firsts, but
There's
overachiever that I am, I had to give you a list.
There's no small firsts. That's the first thing I want to say. There are no small firsts. We just take it for granted, right? That we do all these things and people know that. Are they supposed to know unless we tell them that these are first? I mean, like
That's
being
true.
a first child, that's obvious to everyone.
Right.
But first things in your business, and do they even know this? Do they
It's a
celebrate?
great question. Yeah. And do we talk about it? And I think for me, the exercise of thinking through these firsts was kind of cool because I don't think we think about them.
We don't. I know I didn't. I remember the first time someone said something to me, and I was like, oh, what is that? And it was in disbelief. It was actually someone not believing what I did. And it was the recurring billing platform that Peggy and I built at Amex, which is now used throughout the world,
Right.
literally. And no one ever thought about who created it, right?
Right.
Well, before recurring billing, you couldn't hold a credit card number to hit it time and time again. And so
True.
Peggy and I built that platform at Amex. And so one day, someone was complaining about how difficult it was when you're on recurring billing to, take it apart, like stop your stuff going. And it was really built that way. It was built to be sticky for the customer to stay there and hold the credit card number. I mean, now it's
Without a doubt. And now thanks to that genius idea, think of how all of us have recurring subscription payments that we only catch when our bookkeeper analyzes our Amex statement.
Exactly. But because it's revenue to the company, but also you could now travel and not worry about your bills getting
Yes,
paid. And that's the part we were really
that's beautiful.
focusing on is the ease of payment. And then someone said to me, it was some young whippersnapper, uh, the people who built this, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I love it, and it was just going on and on. And I said, well, what if you found out that I built it? And she's like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And it's so unbelievable to some people. Like, you never think about how things got created. You just use them.
Yes,
But there's a person behind there actually doing the work, actually
without
building.
a doubt. Solving a problem and innovating a solution,
Yes,
you
and
know.
you certainly did that. I see. So let me go down your list of firsts. We could decide which one
Sure,
to
go
talk.
for it.
You were a first child and the first grandchild on your mom's side. How did that impact you and your family?
So I am the first child and the oldest of seven. So it was pretty impactful in that and then my mom had five boys and then a girl. So we were the bookends. So,
Ah,
number one, I think it was impactful in that, I was really the true definition of a mother's helper for most of my life. And I think as the first grandchild, certainly it was a celebrated thing. I'm incredibly well, I was. She passed away 3 years ago, but I was incredibly close to my grandmother on my mom's side, my maternal grandmother. And I would think that that also had a lot to do with it. My grandmother was also my escape when I wanted to get away from all my siblings. So I'd sleep over often. But I think it also came with a lot of responsibility, frankly. As the first, you always had your younger siblings looking to you for your example, coming to you for advice. I definitely feel like I took on a mini mom role. And to this day, my siblings still, most of them come to me when they have big stuff going on. So it's a blessing and it does come with some, added responsibility, I guess. Everybody's watching. I will say, as I'm talking, this could be therapy here, is you also get held to a different set of rules as, the oldest, or at least in I found in my situation. So as much as I tried to be rebellious and independent in different ways, I think also I was always held to a different standard. So,
I agree with that. I'm not the first child, but I think when you're the first girl, you get the same thing as a first child
yes, I
because
would
the first
agree.
girl takes on that role, even if there's an older boy,
Hmm.
they take on that role of the mommy, mommy type person to mother everyone else when mommy's not around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I totally
Interesting,
understand.
right?
It is.
Hmm.
And there's the middle child syndrome that goes along with that. But I think it's actually harder being a first girl than a first child, even if you're a girl.
Hmm.
Because
I think, sorry, go ahead.
no, when you're the first child, you get that ooh, you know. But when you're not the first child, you just get the responsibility without the ooh.
And I also think back, and not that I would have a definitive recollection, but certainly at the time that I was born, I'm 53. So I think, being a girl may not have been as celebrated initially as well,
Right.
because you weren't the first boy.
That's true.
And I do think there were double standards in a lot of ways. So here's a great example of a double standard. So The next brother after me is 2 years younger. And when we were kids, we were always looking to make extra money in the neighborhood. And we had a sweet older woman next door, Mrs. Johansson, and I wanted to mow her lawn for $2 a week. And my dad would not let me use the power lawnmower. He gave me this antique, old-fashioned push mower. So I would have to push it, then rake all the crap up because it didn't go into a bag or anything like that. And my younger brothers were allowed to use the mower. And it irked me.
Was he afraid of it hurting you? Like, why was that?
I guess because it was a power tool and girls don't use power tools. So here I was push mowing to get my $2 and a butterscotch candy.
Was that your first business?
I was super young, so I guess I would have to say that, and a good old lemonade stand on the corner were my first businesses. But my first, I'll say, real intriguing monetary benefit business was when I was 13.
And what was that?
So I babysat for this couple that were entrepreneurs, and they had a printing company. They would pay me a little extra when the kids went to bed at night to file their bills and invoices. So I started to get a taste, I started working for them when I was 12. And going places, going to the beach, buying ice cream for everyone.
Right. The benefits of money.
1 second. So I discovered at this young age that money gave you options. So fast forward, they actually became Amway distributors in addition to their business, and they had a huge makeup line, and I was in love. So I saved up my babysitting money. I actually took a course, I think it was called Color Me Beautiful, where you learned how to do a color analysis to see whether people were cools or warms and what makeup and clothes should they wear. So I paid to get certified. And I paid $200, which back then was a lot of money for this giant makeup kit. And I happened to grow up in a very, my neighborhood was probably like, I don't know, 40 or 50% Orthodox Jewish and, 50 to 60% Christian, Catholic, whatever. And so I realized that I had this great market to do makeup because the Orthodox Jewish women that I babysat for would have weddings on Thursday nights and on Sundays. And so here I was. Usually I'd beg my parents to drive me, but many a time I would strap my little makeup case on my back, ride my bicycle over, and I was really good at doing makeup at 13.
Wow.
So they would pay me $40 to do their makeup for these weddings. And then I would sell them the lipstick or some of the extra makeup to take with them. And so I started making some money. And so that was really, I think, my first business.
That is so funny because we have, you were in Long Island probably, and I was in Brooklyn, but similar path. I started my babysitting at 10, lived in a Jewish community, pretty Orthodox Jewish community. And so I know all the stuff you said is so true because I used to babysit on same thing, sometimes even on Friday nights because they were going to synagogue and sometimes the child was sick. And so I would go over. And then the first way I started making my money was turning on the lights because
my brothers used to do that.
They'd forget to turn on the lights. They would be sitting in the dark And the first time I realized that was my neighbor, she was very old, maybe in her 80s at the time, but very spry woman. And I would look over on Friday nights and it would be pitch black. And I'm like, why? I know she's home. And then I would see her through the window walking around, and I would go over there and go, Mrs. Goldstein, are you okay? And she's like, could you come turn the lights on for me?
Yep,
And
yep.
I understand fully why.
So, for everyone listening, let's explain that if you are of the Orthodox Jewish faith, you cannot touch or use modern appliances, conveniences, things like
Mechanical, pretty much
electric.
mechanical thing.
You
Yeah,
can't turn your oven on, but you could have stuff in there that was on
exactly.
low, like
Yes.
warming, but you could not turn on electric, things like that. And so that's what we're talking about. I know I'll never forget my brother. One of my youngest brother actually came home one night, and all of a sudden these two guys kind of popped out at him, and it was like 10:30 at night or 10 o'clock at night, and startled him. And then they were like, hey, can you do me a favor? Our grandfather leaned against the wall and knocked the light switch off, and we've got dinner set on the table and no one can see. So
Yeah.
he ran in, same thing. But yeah, that's so funny. So many similarities. And,
And,
I did get fired from one babysitting job,
oh,
and
really?
it was a first. So we're staying aligned. And here's what happened. I was watching the children for an Orthodox couple. They went to a wedding and the mom had left food. And again, I just want to say for the record, I was like 12 or 13. So the fact that I even had to cook dinner for the kids is shocking, because who in
Yes.
this day and age lets a 12 or
No.
13-year-old cook
Yeah.
on a real stove? But I knew how to do it. Well, I thought it would be so amazing to offer the kids their choice of the hamburger that their mom left out or a cheeseburger. So they thought cheeseburgers were the greatest thing ever. Well, here was the problem. So I go home later that afternoon. My house phone rings. I hear my mom say, "She did what?" And I was like, what did I do? Oh my God, I don't even think my sister was alive yet. So I knew it was me. Well, I did not know what a kosher kitchen was,
Yeah.
except that they had two different sets of dishes and knives and this and that. So you're not allowed to mix, again, for the listeners who are unfamiliar, you cannot mix dairy with
Yes.
meat. If they
Yes.
eat meat, that is one day. The
Right.
next day, if they eat dairy, that's another, but they don't mix. So although the children thought I was a great hero for giving them cheeseburgers, everyone had to get blessed, and I was fired and never went to watch those children again. And I watched them like 3 days a week.
Maureen, that is so, I'm telling you, we're living parallel lives. And my
Did you
first,
have a moment like that too?
I had a moment, was not with a Jewish family, because I turned my babysitting into a daycare.
I remember that
And
story.
so I have this daycare and I give out, all the requirements, like when you're joining and you're bringing food, you have to check off what your kid is. And there was this little boy, no name mentioned. He's probably watching my podcast at some point. And he loved hot dogs. Like he loved any meats, really, that you gave. And I used to fix breakfast and do everything. And so he would eat bacon, he'd eat the sausage, he would just eat everything. This was going on for like a year, Maury. And then one day his mom, I think it was either his mom or his grandmother, came to pick him up early. And I always gave the kids snacks in the afternoon, and it was a hot dog. I remember I made hot dogs. This little boy had probably gained like 20 pounds since he was at my school. And there he was with a hot dog with everything on it, like everything, right? And that was his favorite. And I remember the horror. I think it was his grandmother. She came in and she's like, what did you give my grandson? I'm like, it's a hot dog. And she's like, oh my God, they're vegetarian.
That's hilarious. Well, apparently your grandson is not vegetarian.
He did not tell them this, but
Oh
the
my God.
kid
He was
was
living his best life, coming to Miss Sandy, getting his hot dogs and bacon.
bacon and whatever. And he would not tell them because he was smart. He didn't say a word because he didn't get that at home. And all
Right.
the other kids were eating this, so it's weird for him not to want to participate. And then they threatened to shut me down. And but I took out process and procedures. Sandy was alive and well at that age. I took out my little book and I flipped through, and they did not check off the food thing that
There
this
you
one was.
go.
So I covered
Why does
myself.
that not shock me at all that even as a young kid, Sandy had her processes and procedures? I love it.
How did all of that experience help you? Because you're the first also to grow $1 million business. How did any of that help you in growing your business? Did you learn anything or utilize any of the things that you learned?
Well, I think certainly between the couple that I babysat for and observed, that gave me kind of the taste. I also had an uncle who was an entrepreneur. He owned an insurance brokerage firm in Astoria, Queens, New York. And he also then, from the proceeds that he was making, had beautiful cars, bought a summer house out by the Hamptons, invested in buildings. And even as a child, that resonated with me. I also think being the first, I was super competitive and I never liked being told, like the mowing story, that I could not do something. Also, when I was a teenager, on the verge of starting college, um, it was interesting to me that the conversations were always around the big three jobs, for
Right,
girls. You could
right.
be a nurse, you could be a teacher, or you could be a secretary.
That's correct.
And, that pissed me off too. And so I think that inner rebel just always pushed me to, try to create my own path. But it happened more organically, to be honest. The inevitable point when I became an entrepreneur was also because someone pissed me off. I was running a company, very successful multi-million dollar trade show display company. I had 40 people on my team. I was probably the youngest general manager. I was their first. Well, I shouldn't say I was their first general manager. I think I was, but I'm not 1,000%. But I was their top producer. And then I went on to run the company. But at the time when I took over, I never thought, because I was in my 20s, I was 28 going on 29 at the
That's
time that
pretty
I
young.
got promoted, which is super young. Never thought to look at their financials. I was super successful as their top salesperson,
Right.
and then sales manager, but I didn't know the company was actually in debt. So here I take over this company and quickly discover they're in the red, not the black. But we were able to turn that around in 18 months, get them
That's amazing.
profitable again. And during that time, there were a lot of things that we did without. I was able to rally my team with no raises for 2 years, with the promise that as soon as we turned the ship and
Right.
got profitable again, that they would get raises. And the long story short, I did my budget for the upcoming year, presented it to my boss, and basically she rejected it and said she was not authorizing raises for anyone for another year. And I said, well, that wasn't the deal that I sold to the team.
Right.
So now you're making me look like a liar. And she was like, well, that's That's what it is. And she said, so you either deal with it or you quit.
What
And I
was
was
her
like,
rationale for not giving
because
it?
they wanted to pay back shareholder loans that the business had been, the founder and the parent company had been loaning that business for apparently 5 years. So again, I never would have thought, because I had never run a company before and was, 29. And then it was, I guess, 30 when the shit hit the fan. And so, yeah, I mean, I never thought to ask, but at that point, she knew those conversations had been had. She knew that was the deal I struck with the team. And so I felt compelled to walk away. I really was up against a wall, and I had no choice because I gave my word. Like, I literally would pay for the holiday party for 40 people because there was no budget to do it.
Right.
So, um, you know, hindsight certainly, is interesting, but so that's when I was at this pivotal crux, right? Go work for someone else. And I actually had an amazing offer on the table from a competitor at that time, or start my own thing. And I decided to start my own thing. I think deep down, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to call the shots. I was in my 30s. I wanted to think about starting a family. And I knew that the role that I had on the corporate side, getting up at 4:30 in the morning and getting home at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, wasn't sustainable for my heart if I wanted to start a family. And so I think it just led into lots of reasons, that I went down that path. Yeah. And then became the first, certainly in my family, to grow a multi-million-dollar company, which was really cool.
Now, do you understand now that you're a business owner? Do you understand or where that other business owner was coming from? Like there were things you didn't know that she made, as a business owner, she made decisions on, and that probably was a bigger thing she needed to do than giving the raises. Do you have a better understanding now that you're a business owner on this side?
I do, however, the owner of the company actually was a second generation who was just chairman of the board at that point and CEO, and was not actively involved in the business. She was living her best life, globetrotting. The president of the company, who I direct reported to, had to respond and be accountable to the owner. And I think the owner wanted some of her money back. And I get that 100%. They had lent significant amounts of money to the company to maintain their overhead and operating expenses. We had a very expensive office on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan that the owner wanted for optics purposes for a
Right.
long time.
Yes.
Um,
I
and that
remember.
costs money. So yeah, as a business owner, looking back, I get it. But at the same time, I do think that when you looked at my budget, it all made sense and nothing was egregious. And so I will say I still stand by it because there were workarounds. Maybe they could have said, okay, no new computers, or they could have looked at, reducing some of my other expenses. There was significant fallout. It was my team and I were tight. And
Did you bring them with you?
well, I couldn't because A, I was starting up from scratch. I bootstrapped it. And B, they all had non-competes. I actually went and got them to waive my non-compete. Talk about, having nerve.
Yes.
After the dust settled and I decided to start my own thing, I lived on Long Island outside of Manhattan at that point. And so I went and said, hey, you guys never did much with this territory. I'd like your blessing to just do my own thing. If you want, I'll sell your product, but my whole business model is finding the right solution. So if your product is the right solution, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I ended up getting their blessing. I ended up getting an apology years later after my former boss saw me on the Today Show celebrating that I had, broken this barrier of $1 million in revenue and was in the top 1.7% of all women-owned businesses, which you were one of them as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got the apology, which, helped. It validated that. And I'll never forget because, I did get choked up when I got the note. And there was a line in the note, aside from the apology, that said something to the effect of, seeing what you've accomplished, I just know in my heart you would have never had the opportunity to thrive the way that you have as your own, business owner. And I thought that that was really interesting. So,
But that's true, though. I mean, were you ever going to become an owner of the company to really be able to make those top level decisions? And it's hard when you're working with a small company. In corporate, you have more of an opportunity to go up through the ranks, and you could
right,
start at secretary and become president someday. You know, people
right.
have done that, like climbed every single ladder. And so when I was in corporate, that was never my aspiration to become, VP. Like the titles didn't matter to me. And maybe it should have, but it just didn't because money came with it. But I was very invested in learning all the different jobs. I knew one day, I didn't know what day it was, but one day I would have my own business and I needed to know customer service, collections, presidential complaints, how to respond to them. I went over to marketing. I when I worked at Saks, I learned how to open up a new store. I learned all this stuff that
Yes,
my head was full of, and I'm like, one day I'm going to use all these pieces of information for myself. And so people were pushing me, you need to take this promotion, you need, and it was just never that important to me unless I'm like, what am I going to learn? Tell me what is it new that I'm going to learn, and then I'll take it, which is what I did. But you do have more of an opportunity in the corporate world to climb that ladder than
for
if you're a
sure.
small company. Now, did you make sure when you had your company, what kind of promotional capabilities did you give to your team?
As far as promoting, upward
Just,
mobility. Yeah. I mean, so it was interesting as we grew. I think the best success story that's jumping top of mind for me was in the early years. So I started the business in one room in my house. And then it moved to taking over the entire basement of my house, and it had an outside entrance. So as I started to grow, I really wanted to bring on an intern from one of the local colleges. We had some great colleges. And every one of them turned me down except one. And I said, look, I have this set up professionally. I have furniture, I have phones, I have a bathroom and a little kitchen. Like, this is not someone that has to go upstairs into my personal home. Like, this is set up properly. I was like, would you come look? And if you agree with me, you will allow me to post this position in your for an intern. And so the person said yes, came out, inspected everything, green lighted it. And so we brought on our first intern, and she was a marketing major from a great school on Long Island. And she then went on to continue to work for us. She went full time when she graduated, while she went for her master's at night. And she became my right hand person and ultimately then grew to our production manager. So it was so beautiful. And in fact, I will say, when it was time, she had fallen in love and was deciding to move to Virginia. And that was before remote was a thing. And so, and I think, at that point she wanted to test out other avenues,
Yes.
but it was devastating. I cried the week she was leaving. I couldn't even look at her. We'd be in a meeting and I would like get choked up. But because I had watched her grow and really morph into this confident, amazing woman. And what she taught me was, how to really lead from scratch and really mold and mentor someone. I had always managed people before, and that was never an issue. But this one was different because it literally was taking someone and figuring out, and it really actually, funny fact, became the basis of how I trained and onboarded new people. And it became a coaching scenario where it was always, and in fact, the woman's name was Joanna. And as I was grooming her, she would come in and say, okay, this is going on. What do I do? And I stopped and I realized, well, what do you think we should do in this situation? And so I would never answer her. I would always ask the question. So it was almost like coaching, right? When you work with a business coach, well, what do you think? And so that became the basis of how we would onboard people. We would then make sure that they were retaining, and we'd give them lots of scenarios where they had to make a judgment call. And if they were wrong, or there might have been maybe not wrong, but a better way to do things, we'd have conversation around it, and I find that even then rolled into becoming a parent, and I still use that with my son to this day. Well, what could you do differently? What do you think what do you think would be the best angle? And so so it turned into a good mentoring and coaching opportunity.
Yeah, my first intern, I think, never left.
Oh, I
I
love
think
that.
she's still there at the company. She's
Wow. So you groomed her, you sold the company, and she's still there. That's amazing. What a great
She
commentary.
grew within the company. She
Yes.
started out, like you said, we got her from the college because we were located on a college campus. She came in, she was a marketing major, but never did marketing. Like a lot of people, you do it in school,
Right.
but don't really do it. And she came in and we taught her. I remember her first social media, teaching her how to do the social media for us. And that, she was so smart. She picked everything up like this. And she started doing more than just social media, more than everything else. And at that time, we were thinking about starting placing junior people in corporations because up to that time, we had only placed very senior, tenured people. But we
Right.
realized there was a niche in marketing where you needed junior people who were smart and sharp to come in and
Yes.
new technology, right?
Mm.
Because the old fogies like us didn't all, we weren't fast on the technology at the time. And so we trained her and placed her in a corporation to do that technology. She grew from there and now she became a full-time consultant, working on our team and got bigger and bigger promotions, which meant more dollars per hour. And
Right.
she is still there. I mean, she started her own nonprofits on the side and she still has a really big nonprofit doing sickle cell work, but she's still there. I'm pretty sure
Amazing. Oh, I love that.
we
It's
have
so great. You don't think about that when you sign on to become an entrepreneur. You don't think about the impact that you will make on people's lives. And I'm so grateful for that. Um, because I'm still in touch with so many people that have either worked for me when I was on the other side or worked for me,
right.
when I have had my own companies. So
Yeah,
it's
we
fun.
we
And
did
even
we
now,
did the
like
same.
my new team. So yeah, it's so fun. Sorry, I
It's
cut
fun.
you off.
But I learned I learned a lot of the negative stuff in corporate, and I was able to, I guess, correct, for lack of
Yeah.
a better word, say, I don't want that. So the things that I learned that were very negative impacted me more than the things that were positive, because there were things I'm like, I will never do that in my company. I will never treat people a certain
Yes.
way in my company. And that was all because I got treated that way. And one of them, diversity is a big thing now, which, thank you. It's about time. I'm just
About
way, way
time
about
for
time.
sure.
Because people never realize that when you're different than them, they treat you differently.
Hmm.
And that just happens. I'm not saying it's intentional, but it's because you do come with these biases and you bring it. I have my own biases about them too, right? And
Right.
you never really think about it in that sense. But people tend to gravitate to people that are like them. And
Hmm.
when you're in a corporate world and you're the only one that stands out, a woman, I was in analytics for a long time where there are few women over on that
Right.
side,
Right.
few, even less black women, over on that side. So I learned things that I absorbed. And I was telling someone the other day that if you ask anyone I worked with, they'd call me like the loudmouth, Sandy, I always spoke out. I don't treat me like that. No, I'll have something to say. And it wasn't always taken well. You got tagged
Yes.
and labeled, if you're a woman and you speak out, it's like, oh, the B word.
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
okay.
Because God forbid you should actually have a point of view or
Yeah.
stand up for yourself.
And I said, I don't want that in my company. I want
Hmm.
people to be able to say things now respectfully, of course. I don't think I was ever, well, yeah, maybe I was disrespectful sometimes in what, because I would hit back, and even when you take it to HR, sometimes you don't get the things that they should be doing for you. And so you
Right.
take it into your own hands under your own control. But I started my company, I'm like, won't do this, won't do that, won't do that. More so than the I will, I will, I will. I had a long list of I won't. So it does impact you. And I'm so
I
glad.
agree. 100%.
Yeah, I have this diversity talk that I do on uncovering unconscious bias. And we did it couple weeks ago. And one woman said to me, I had never I keep hearing about diversity, diversity. I'm like, what's the big deal? And until you started talking about some of the things that you experience, I started quaking inside of myself. And it was a white woman. And she said, I've done that to people. And
Mm.
I didn't realize, that I was actually doing it. It wasn't intentional, but now you're talking about it. I'm like, well, if you remember who they are, go back and apologize to them.
Right.
It's fixable, right?
It is fixable and it's awareness.
Yes,
100%.
yes. So I'm so glad that we have our own businesses and we can make our own way and our own decisions about what we will and won't have in our companies.
Very true.
So the other thing here is the board of directors. I saw you were first on a board of directors. Tell me about that because I want to get on a paid board of directors.
Well, that is also my goal, to get on a paid board. But I was the first in my family to be on a board of directors for a couple of different not-for-profits. I'm thinking the order that it all happened, I would say probably count me in for Women's Economic Independence, with our friend Nell Merlino,
Yes.
was the first board I was invited to. And that was a big deal for me. It was an honor to be on that board because it was filled with brilliant, smart, compassionate people, primarily women. And some of these women, for example, were the first women, that were making noise for Goldman Sachs back in the day. I mean, they were trailblazers. Certainly Nell is a trailblazer with, take our daughters to work day and things like that. So I loved it because it enabled me to bring my perspective as the constituent, as the woman-owned small business, and also understand more about the economic impact that organizations like that were driving. And so that led to getting on some other boards. It led to me getting active with my NAWBO chapter, the National Association of Women Business Owners. I know you know it, but for our listeners, that's what it stands for. And so then I took things that I became really passionate about. And ironically, I became the chair of their education committee and board member for several years. And so it's funny now today, because what do? I provide, fractional C-suite strategic consulting, where I'm working as, chief marketing officer or chief operations officer for different clients. But I've developed courses, training, and masterminds for women entrepreneurs. And so it's kind of funny looking back as I made this list to say, aha, that I was so passionate, because I would get so annoyed and frankly pissed when I'd show up at events and it was just topical conversation, like the subject matter was bullshit. And I would be like, I just got up, I left my kid, I left my business, I'm here. And yes, I love networking, but you've got to give me something more that I can take back to grow my business. And so I realized that really that spearheaded a lot of what I'm doing today from a content creation standpoint.
So tell us what is, I know you have a podcast as well. Tell us more about your business. And
Sure. So I have the Real Talk podcast with Maureen Borzacchiello. You can go to Maureen Borza, BORZA.com, and find some links there, or look it up on iTunes. We made it easy, so you don't have to spell Borzacchiello. You just have to do Borza. And I also, within the scope of that, I offer training, one-on-one coaching, and also strategic consulting to entrepreneurs. And so that is, that's what I've got going on right now. And it's really fun because I get to either, work high-level strategy, which I'm doing for a couple of great companies right now, or I get to do, training and speaking and engagement, where I'm able to start to share important things that are going to move the needle for people. Look, I look back and I say, what do I wish I had access to from an information standpoint when I was growing and scaling and, building my business? And that's what I've created for people. I take the landmines that I stepped right in and detonated, and I teach people how to avoid them. I bring, collaboration, like with yourself, with your how to form an advisory board course, and try to highlight people, collaborate and bring things together that move the needle. Sandi, I know you and I share a real passion in that the data and the numbers around female entrepreneurship drives us a little crazy. And I think we're equally passionate to move the needle. And for those of you listening, what we're talking about is in the US, there are over 11 million women-owned businesses, and yet only 1.7% ever get to $1 million and beyond in gross revenue. Even more staggering is that 88% of women-owned businesses never gross more than $100,000 in annual revenue. And so look, we're not saying that you have to be a multi-million dollar business, but what we're saying is if you have a dream and you want to create jobs and you want to do something to help your families, getting help to grow your business is a great thing. And there's no shame in asking for help. And there's no shame in wanting more, whether it's to have a $250,000 profitable business,
Yes.
or
That's the point. That is the point
exactly.
right there that
Mm-hmm.
concerns me. Because when you have $1 million business, it doesn't mean you're taking home $1 million,
You're not a millionaire, people. You are
right?
not a millionaire.
And people keep saying, yeah, you made $1 million. Well, if my cost is high, I have to pay all my employees.
Yep.
I have to pay the cost of running my business. There's technology that we have.
Yes.
There's insurance that you have to
Mm-hmm.
pay. You have to pay taxes out of that. Sometimes you barely have enough money left over for yourself,
Yes.
right? And so that's the bottom line. I think people talk about $1 million business like, oh, that's it, you've arrived. And you're
That's when
not
the big ass
start,
problems kick in.
start, really. And that's where you really have to put your thinking cap on
Mm-hmm.
and say, let me really manage my books, because you could be a broke $1 million business
Yes,
easily.
easily.
I
I almost
remember,
bankrupted my company twice. You learn, I guess I could add that to my first. I was the first to almost go under because we were growing too fast. Oh my God, that leads to two. First, Sandy, I'm so excited. So, the short version, we hired a lot of people as we were growing. And what you forget is things like fringe, social security,
yes,
taxes, and all these overheads. I also thought it was a great idea at the time that since I was hiring all these new people, I should buy brand new office
it's
furniture for everyone. And that was a lot of money and not my finest expenditure.
yeah,
But as a result of hitting a wall and having to pivot and realizing that although we had business coming in, our cash flow was crippled.
yes,
We had to make some big decisions, which led to being interviewed for Inc. magazine by Donna Fenn, and having to like publicly admit a
yes,
mistake.
yes.
That was a
Oh
big
my God.
deal
Yes,
that, to be humbled and to say, we almost went under. Here were the pivots we made. Here's how we hunkered down. Here was what my team's response was because I had to go tell them. So I was the first to not only like admit something like that
air the dirty
publicly,
laundry.
right? And by the way, that led to another first because McGraw Hill saw that article and invited me to be in one of their business textbooks that colleges use around, the world to teach
Really?
business. Yes, I have it somewhere. It's
God,
in one of
that
my, right? So now, oh my God, all right, the magazine came and went, now I'm in a textbook
one.
somewhere sharing this humbling story. And
Yes.
so, yeah, so that's another first. I was in a textbook
Yeah.
for business students.
I'm really concerned when they say, the fastest growing segment of business owners are women, Black African American businesswomen. Because in my head, I'm like, how many of them are going to get to that $1 million mark? How
Yeah,
many of them are going to be profitable? How many of them are going to close after a year? I mean, you talk about startups, but what are the fastest closing businesses
exactly.
that are happening? And are they getting this knowledge that we got to help them? There are a lot of programs, like Goldman Sachs has a program,
Hmm.
every bank
Capital One.
sponsors
Yeah, yeah.
some kind of program, but how many of those women are really going to utilize it and change their businesses so that there are more of them becoming the $1 million business where you really start to thrive or make steps towards thriving than staying at that 50,000, 100,000 mark where you're really not making money unless you have a lifestyle business and it's just you and maybe an
Right.
assistant. If you have employees, you're not really making any money. You're just barely getting along. And is that better than earning a salary that is all yours in corporate? Like I have all these little things going on in my head. Like,
Yeah.
is that really better? You know, at what point does owning your business become better than working for someone else? Well, if you're
Right.
not making any money in your business,
Yeah.
you've got to
And
go
what's
get
the
a side
point?
gig. Yeah, your
Exactly.
business should be your side hustle if that's
Until
the
it can
case.
sustain,
Yes,
your financial obligations. No, I think you're so right. And I also think that um the glamour or perceived glamour around it, people need to shake that off. As I was listening to, I was also thinking about, the great book from Michael Gerber, E-Myth or E-Myth
yes.
Revisited, where there are a lot of great technicians, you know, um, you may be great at something. You may be an amazing hairstylist, but are you a great
Business,
salon owner?
yes, yes. You're not a business
Um,
person, and we
right.
all
Are you a
do
great chef? Well, does that make you a
a
great
great business person.
restaurateur? Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that.
We know
And
the
so,
practical side of things, but we don't know the business side, right?
right.
And
And I
that's why I'm
think,
thankful for corporate because
yeah,
that gave me knowledge of the business side so that when I left, I was fully prepared on what
right.
to do.
And I think you said something else that stuck in my head. There are a lot of programs out there, but how many entrepreneurs are really leveraging them and taking advantage of them? And I get it. It's hard. We both did the Goldman Sachs program,
Made by the
at
million, I did
day
the
and
bank.
right. And all of these, and it's hard. I remember on the weekends, my family like, you're doing homework. I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, I am, because, you know, Dartmouth Tuck School of Business had a
yes,
program,
yep,
creating and growing a minority owned and woman owned business, something like that.
yes,
But
yes.
I remember they gave some work to do before you got there. And I was so intimidated because, oh my God, I'm going to Dartmouth.
Yeah.
I've got to be prepared. I'm up here for a week or two, whatever it was. And I was so freaked out that I spent hours preparing for this trip. I got there a day early and sat in my binders and my financials and my numbers and reviewing. I think they gave us Walmart's financial annual report and financial statement. I knew that thing backward and forward. Of course, Miss Overachiever, I was the only person that reviewed any of the curriculum material before we got there. But I was so afraid of being embarrassed of what I didn't know
Right,
and potentially, was going to come up at such a prestigious program that, I wanted to have my stuff together and
yes,
like come in guns blazing. And so I certainly did and was like cracking up afterwards because I was the only one. But the point is, we've both invested a lot of time in growing ourselves,
yes.
as
Self-education.
professionals, as women, as entrepreneurs. And I think that that's probably the difference of why, what is it, like 85% of all businesses fail within the
Yeah.
first 5 years?
You have
Like,
to put in the work
you do.
on yourself,
And
on
yeah,
yourself.
and people do work so hard on their business, but they forget to work it, or they work so hard in the business,
Not
but they
on
may not work so hard on the business or on themselves to figure out what they just don't know
it.
yet because they don't know it. They don't know they need to know,
And
right?
I tell you, even coming from corporate where we knew a lot, Peggy and I knew
Right.
a lot. But when it's your business and your money,
Yes.
It's a little different
It
than
sure
somebody
is.
throwing you, a $10 million budget, right, to go
Right.
run programs, and then you just have to give them the response and why it didn't work or why it worked. But when it's your money and nobody's
Yes.
throwing you even $1,000, you
Right. Now you've got a
got it.
$10 budget. How do you make that work?
Exactly, or no budget, a zero budget
Right.
on that line. It's
Yes.
very different. And those women, I mean, we joke that we were program junkies because we took every single program, and a lot of them were useful. I always took
Yes.
away something
Yes.
that stuck with me. I remember I was doing WeBank,
Mm-hmm.
and it was right 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Like the worst time at that time in our business, right?
Yes.
Everything was crashing, financial crises, and I was sitting in the class, and we were at the point in 2008 where everybody else was crashing, but we're a lagging company. We are a lagging indicator, so things weren't going to hit us until 2009 because
Right.
we had all the contracts in place. Our contracts expired in 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be nothing after that. No one was hiring, nothing. And I took this program, was the end of 2008, as these contracts were dying, and we were worrying, like, what are we going to do? Phones aren't ringing or anything. And I was in that class, and they gave this analogy of, we call it the throw them over the boat, the side of the boat. But
Yes.
you're in a boat, all of you and your whole team are in this boat, and alligators are snapping at you, and you have to make a decision as to who you're going to throw over first. Let me tell you, it was so graphic in my head because we were deciding if we had to let people go from our company
Mm-hmm.
and who would be the first person to be let go, because there was nothing that said we could keep all these people and run the company the same there, even if we weren't paying them or put off pay. It's just an overhead, right? And I ran out the room and called Peggy, and I'm like, we're gonna throw people overboard. That's just what I said. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we have to throw people out of the boat, Peg. We have to throw. And she's like, calm down. We're not throwing. I'm like, we are.
We do. We need to. That
And
probably is the worst thing about being an entrepreneur is like
yes,
having a moment where you know you have to save the
a
company.
hard moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, we sat on the phone. I sat down on the floor in the hallway. This is how impactful it was. And we started lining up all our people. And okay, who's going to go first? Like, who has the least, uh, I shouldn't say youth, but if we keep this person, they could do two or three of the jobs. And this
Right.
person, what are the skill sets? I didn't even go back in the room to like 2 hours later
Wow.
because this was so important to us. And we wound up making a decision, ranking people. This one goes first. This is the last man in the boat with us. The
Mm-hmm.
last person. This is the one who could do everything. And I tell you, we utilized that for the rest of the time we were in the company.
I believe it. I believe it. It's a critical moment drives awareness around it, but then you have the ability to keep an eye on it
Yes,
in a really succinct way moving forward.
yes.
But yeah, it's the worst, I
But
will
we
say
always
though.
talked about, okay, who's the last man in the boat? Like she and I used to talk,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
if we had to cut tomorrow, who's going to be, the first person that has to go? And it wasn't a person so much as a job,
Yes.
and there's a person affiliated with that job. But you
And
look
that's what
at it.
complicates it, right? Because
Exactly.
then I remember when I had to do that, literally like just sitting there with tears streaming down my face going, okay, well, this one's got 3 kids and is recently divorced and like a single mom. This one just got his first
Yeah.
apartment out of college and like
You live.
just signed a lease. Like, oh my God, like this sucks. What do
Yeah.
we do? And then as the business owner, you have to look at it from the perspective, as you say, what are the roles? What is the value they bring to the organization? What can't you live without? And what can you source?
Yeah.
That was an aha for me at the point that we had one of those situations where there were a few roles that we realized we were able to contract. In particular, in the experiential marketing world, we had structural designers that designed big exhibits to make sure they could stand. Then we had graphic designers that pulled together client messaging, imagery, et cetera. And then we had 3D designers that made all of it come to life in a beautiful 3D rendering, right? Or fly through. And what we realized was each one of those roles could be subbed out as a
Right.
contract role, based on our capacity,
Right.
because there were times where we didn't have any work for some of them. Maybe
Correct.
one was slammed because of where we were in proposal and execution stages. And then the other 2 were like, oh,
Yes.
we don't have anything going
La, la,
on,
la,
but you're
la, la,
paying
la, la, la.
me a
Yeah.
really lot of money and I'm going to walk around and distract other people from doing their jobs, la, la, la,
Exactly.
la, la.
Exactly.
So
No, those were
interesting.
learnings. Those were things that I learned that I will always take with me.
Yeah.
And no matter what business, I keep an eye on it because it's
Mm-hmm.
so important. Well, we've come to the end of the road for
Oh, I'm
our
so
podcast.
sad. I could talk to you forever.
So, with that in closing, what are some of the ways that you're using all this knowledge to impact other people, Maureen?
Well, Sandy, what I will say is that it's very clear to me that my journey on this earth would not be complete without sharing the knowledge of my journey and my path and with other people, with other entrepreneurs who are looking to make a difference in their lives, for their families, for their team. And if I can do that every day as I live my life, like that is such a rich and full life. And so I'm so grateful to have had the good and bad experiences and journey, that I have had, that has brought me to this point where I can help others better their lives, for themselves and their families. So, I mean, as corny as it sounds, like I'm just so blessed.
Yes,
Um, and I'm blessed that God gave me the gift of gab to be able to articulate and share it in a way that seems to resonate with people. So, you
thank you.
know,
Thank you so much. We've been speaking to Maureen Borzacchiello, and I would love to have you back some other time. We'll continue
well,
this.
thank you. I would love it. That would be amazing. And thank you for all that you're doing to share people's stories about their firsts, as well as everything else that you've got
You're
going on.
welcome. This is Dr. Sandy. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no 2 stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.